The gunshots echoed across the dusty plains of Colorado Territory as Grace Lawson clutched her swollen belly and urged her exhausted mare forward, knowing that if she slowed even for a moment, the men pursuing her would show no mercy to her or her unborn child. The year was 1873, and Grace's lungs burned with each desperate breath as her horse stumbled over the uneven terrain. She'd been running for nearly 2 days, stopping only when absolutely necessary to rest her horse or relieve herself behind scrubby bushes that offered little protection from prying eyes. The outlaws had picked up her trail again just after dawn, and she could hear their whoops of excitement growing closer. "Please, just a little further," she whispered to her horse, patting the animal's lathered neck. Her wedding band caught the morning light, a bitter reminder of all she had lost. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder behind her and panic clawed at her throat. The baby kicked inside her as if sensing her terror. She crested a small rise and her heart nearly stopped. Below her lay a small homestead, a modest cabin with smoke rising from the chimney, a corral with a few horses, and a barn that had seen better days. It was the first sign of civilization she'd encountered since fleeing the massacre at the stagecoach 2 days prior. Grace slid from her horse, her legs nearly buckling beneath her as they hit the ground. She half ran, half stumbled down the hill, one hand supporting her 7-month belly, the other leading her exhausted mare. "Help!" she cried out, her voice cracking from thirst and exhaustion. "Please, someone help me." The cabin door swung open and a tall man stepped out, rifle in hand. He squinted against the morning sun, taking in the sight of Grace's disheveled appearance, her torn dress, wild hair, and the obvious swell of her pregnancy. Samuel Jackson had been enjoying his morning coffee when the commotion interrupted his quiet routine. At 32, he'd seen enough trouble to recognize it approaching his doorstep. His weathered face remained impassive as he assessed the situation, his keen eyes quickly noting the dust cloud on the horizon that indicated riders approaching fast. "They're coming," Grace gasped as she drew closer. "Please, they'll kill me. They've already killed everyone else." Samuel stepped off his porch, his movements deliberate and calm. "Who's coming, madam?" "Blackwater gang," she managed between ragged breaths. "They attacked the stagecoach. Everyone's dead. My husband, they shot him when he tried to protect me." Samuel's jaw tightened at the mention of the notorious gang. He'd had his own run-ins with them in the past, and the scars on his back served as a permanent reminder. "Get in the house," he commanded, taking the reins of her horse. Now, Grace didn't need to be told twice. She hurried up the steps and into the cabin as Samuel quickly led her horse to the barn, out of sight. Inside the cabin, Grace leaned against the rough-hewn table, trying to catch her breath. The interior was sparse but clean, a man's home with little adornment. A bed in the corner, a small stove, shelves with provisions, and a few books stacked neatly on a small table. Samuel returned moments later, closing the door behind him. He moved to the window, peering out cautiously. 5 riders, he observed. Heavily armed, Grace felt her knees weaken. I can't let them take me." Her hand went protectively to her belly. "They said things, terrible things about what they'd do to me, to my baby." Samuel's eyes flickered to her midsection, then back to the window. His face revealed nothing, but something shifted in his posture, a subtle squaring of his shoulders. "I need you to hide," he said, moving to a large chest in the corner. He opened it and removed several guns, checking each one methodically. "There's a root cellar under the rug by the stove. Get in there and don't make a sound, no matter what you hear." Grace nodded, tears of exhaustion and fear streaming down her face. She moved to the spot he'd indicated and found the trapdoor. It was dark and smelled of earth and potatoes, but she lowered herself in without hesitation, one hand always protecting her belly. "What will you do?" she asked, looking up at him from the darkness. Samuel's expression was grim as he tucked a revolver into his belt. "What needs to be done, madam?" He closed the trapdoor, replaced the rug, and moved a chair over it for good measure. Then he took up position by the window, watching as the riders approached his property at a gallop. Samuel recognized Elias Driscoll at the head of the pack, the self-proclaimed leader of the Blackwater gang. The man's reputation for cruelty was well earned, particularly when it came to women. Behind him rode his four most loyal companions, each as ruthless as their leader. Samuel stepped onto his porch as they reined in their horses in his yard, dust billowing around them. "Mornin', gentlemen," Samuel called, his voice casual despite the rifle held loosely in his hands. "What brings you to my property?" Driscoll spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the dirt. "Tracking a runaway, Jackson. Woman stole something valuable from us. Saw tracks heading this way." "Ain't seen any woman," Samuel replied evenly. "Just me and my stock here." Driscoll's eyes narrowed. "Mind if we take a look around? Won't take but a minute." "Actually, I do mind." Samuel's grip on his rifle tightened almost imperceptibly. "This is private property." One of Driscoll's men laughed. "Since when has that ever stopped us?" "Since now," Samuel replied, raising his rifle slightly. "I'd appreciate it if you boys would move along." Driscoll's hand moved toward his holster. "Now, Jackson, don't be foolish. We both know you're outgunned here." Samuel's voice remained calm. "Maybe so. But I guarantee I'll take at least 3 of you with me." "You willing to bet you won't be among them, Driscoll?" The tension stretched between them like a taut wire. Inside the cellar, Grace held her breath, one hand pressed over her mouth to stifle any sound, the other cradling her belly where her child kicked anxiously. "What's it worth to you, Jackson?" Driscoll finally asked, a cruel smile playing at his lips. "Maybe we can come to an arrangement." "What are you offering?" Samuel asked, his expression revealing nothing. "How about this?" Driscoll reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small pouch. He tossed it onto the ground between them. "That's 50 in gold, more than fair for information about a runaway woman." Samuel didn't look at the pouch. "And if I haven't seen her?" "Then consider it payment for your cooperation should we need to search your property." Samuel appeared to consider this for a moment. "And if I were to offer something else instead?" Driscoll raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." In one fluid motion, Samuel drew his revolver, the movement so quick that Driscoll barely had time to register it before finding himself staring down the barrel. "How about I offer you tomorrow?" Samuel said, his voice deadly quiet. "Walk away now and you get to see another sunrise." "That's my only offer." Driscoll's face darkened with rage, but his eyes calculated the distance between them, the steadiness of Samuel's hand, and the determination in his eyes. "You're making a mistake, Jackson." "Wouldn't be my first," Samuel replied. "Won't be my last, but I'll live with it." "Question is, will you?" The standoff continued for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, Driscoll jerked his head at his men. "We'll be back, Jackson, count on it." "I'll be waiting," Samuel promised. Driscoll spurred his horse, turning it sharply. His men followed, but not before one of them fired a shot that splintered the wood of Samuel's porch just inches from his boot. Samuel didn't flinch, keeping his weapon trained on them until they disappeared over the ridge. Only when they were well out of sight did Samuel lower his gun and step back into the cabin. He moved the chair and pulled back the rug. "They're gone for now," he said as he opened the trapdoor. "But they'll be back. Driscoll doesn't take kindly to being challenged." Grace blinked in the sudden light as Samuel offered his hand to help her out of the cellar. Her legs trembled so badly she could barely stand. "Why did you help me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Samuel's eyes met hers, and for the first time she noticed they were a deep blue like the sky after a storm. "Some things a man does because they need doing, madam. No other reason required." He guided her to a chair and poured her a cup of water from a pitcher. "Drink this, slowly. Then we'll talk about what happens next." Grace sipped the water gratefully, studying the man who had just risked his life for her. He moved around the cabin with the ease of someone comfortable in his own space, gathering supplies and occasionally glancing out the windows. "My name is Grace," she offered, "Grace Lawson. My husband Thomas and I were traveling to Denver when the stagecoach was attacked." Her voice caught. Thomas worked for Wells Fargo. We were going to start a new life there before the baby came. Samuel nodded, his expression softening slightly. Samuel Jackson, most folks call me Sam. Thank you, Mr. Jackson, for what you did out there, Sam, he corrected. And you should rest, Mrs. Lawson, you look about ready to collapse. Grace, she replied, and I'm afraid to rest. They'll come back, won't they? Sam didn't lie to her. Yes, they will. Driscoll doesn't forgive or forget. He checked his revolver before returning it to his holster. But we won't be here when they do. We, Grace asked, hope and uncertainty mingling in her voice. I'm not in the habit of saving folks just to abandon them after, Sam said. There's a settlement about 4 days' ride from here. I have friends there. You'll be safe. Grace felt tears well in her eyes again. I have nothing to offer you in return. They took everything. My husband's body is probably still lying on that road with the others. Something in Sam's expression shifted, a flicker of old pain quickly masked. I don't want anything from you, Grace. Just rest for a bit while I get things ready. We'll leave at dusk. While Grace rested on Sam's bed, he prepared for their journey. He packed provisions, ammunition, and basic medical supplies. He saddled his sturdy stallion and prepared Grace's mare, ensuring both animals were fit for the difficult journey ahead. As the sun began to set, he gently woke Grace. It's time, he said, offering her a plate of simple food, beans, jerky, and a biscuit. Eat what you can. We've got a long night ahead. Grace ate mechanically, her mind racing with grief, fear, and uncertainty about the future. Her baby kicked vigorously, and she placed her hand over the spot. How far along are you? Sam asked, noticing the gesture as he packed the last of their supplies. 7 months, Grace replied. The doctor in St. Louis said early December. Sam nodded, a look of concern crossing his features. We'll take it slow. Your safety, both of you, is what matters most. They left the cabin as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains. Sam had extinguished all signs of life from the homestead, making it appear abandoned. He led them on a circuitous route, avoiding the main trails and frequently doubling back to ensure they weren't being followed. Grace rode in silence, one hand on the reins, the other often resting on her belly. The rhythmic motion of the horse was uncomfortable in her condition, but she didn't complain. Every mile they put between themselves and the Blackwater gang was a mile closer to safety. As they rode through the darkness, Sam kept a close eye on Grace. Despite her obvious exhaustion and discomfort, she sat straight in the saddle, her determination evident in every line of her body. Your husband, Sam said after hours of silence. He must have been a good man. Grace's voice was soft when she replied. He was. We were childhood sweethearts. His father owned the general store in our town, and Thomas worked there since he was 12. He was kind, always thinking of others. She paused, swallowing hard. When Wells Fargo offered him the position in Denver, he was so excited, said it was our chance to give our child a better life. Sam nodded, understanding all too well the hope for something better. I'm sorry for your loss, thank you. Grace was quiet for a moment. What about you, Sam? Have you always lived alone? Sam's face revealed nothing in the moonlight. For a while now, it suits me. Grace sensed there was more to his story but didn't press. They continued riding through the night, stopping occasionally to rest the horses and allow Grace to stretch her legs. When dawn approached, Sam led them to a small cave he knew of, hidden by thick underbrush. We'll rest here during the day, he explained as he helped her dismount. Safer to travel at night for now. The cave was cool and dry, and Sam quickly set up a small camp. He unrolled a bedroll for Grace, insisting she take it while he sat near the entrance, keeping watch. You should sleep too, Grace said, noting the dark circles under his eyes. I will, just want to make sure we weren't followed. Grace settled onto the bedroll, her body aching from the long ride. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Thomas falling, blood blooming across his chest as he reached for her. Sam, she called softly, needing distraction from her thoughts. How long have you lived in that cabin? Sam turned from his position at the cave entrance. About 5 years, built it myself. It's a nice place, Grace said, sturdy. A ghost of a smile touched Sam's lips. High praise indeed. What did you do before the cabin, I mean? Sam was quiet for so long Grace thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was carefully neutral. Rode with the cavalry for a while, then worked as a scout, did some ranching, tried my hand at mining, none of it stuck. And now I raise horses, train them too. Sell them to folks passing through or in the nearby settlements. His expression softened slightly. I prefer horses to most people. They don't lie or cheat or steal. They're honest creatures. Grace nodded, understanding the appeal of such straightforward companions after witnessing the cruelty humans could inflict upon one another. The horses in your corral, they were beautiful. Thank you. There was genuine pride in his voice. Been breeding them for strength and endurance. They'll fetch a good price when I take them to market next month. His expression clouded, or they would have. Grace felt a pang of guilt. I've cost you your home, haven't I? Sam shook his head. No, Driscoll and his kind did that. You're just caught in the middle of something that started long before you came along. What do you mean? Sam sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. Driscoll and I have history, bad blood going back years. He's been looking for an excuse to come after me. He looked at her directly. You just gave him one. I'm sorry, Grace whispered. Don't be. Some fights are worth having. He nodded toward the bedroll. Get some sleep, Grace. I'll wake you if anything happens. Grace closed her eyes, comforted somehow by Sam's solid presence. Despite everything, the grief, the fear, the uncertainty, she felt safer than she had in days. Sleep finally claimed her, deep and dreamless. When she woke, the cave was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Sam was gone, but her mare and his stallion were still tethered at the back of the cave. Panic fluttered in her chest until she heard movement outside. Sam appeared in the entrance, carrying several rabbits. Hope you're hungry, he said. Thought we could use a hot meal before we set out again. He efficiently skinned and cleaned the rabbits, then started a small, nearly smokeless fire. As the meat cooked, filling the cave with its savory aroma, Grace's stomach rumbled loudly enough for Sam to hear. He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, softening the hard lines and bringing warmth to his eyes. Sounds like I made the right call. They ate in companionable silence, both savoring the simple meal. When they finished, Sam carefully extinguished the fire and packed their few belongings. How are you feeling? He asked as he helped her to her feet. Better, Grace admitted. Still sore, but rested. Good, we've got another long night ahead. He hesitated. The baby, Grace placed a hand on her belly. Active, seems to like being on horseback. Takes after the mother then, Sam said with another small smile. I've never seen a woman handle herself so well under such conditions. Grace felt herself blush at the unexpected compliment. I grew up on a farm. My father taught me to ride before I could walk. They set out as dusk settled over the land, continuing their journey through the rugged terrain. Sam kept them off the main trails, navigating by stars and landmarks only he seemed to recognize. As they rode, Grace found herself studying Sam when he wasn't looking. There was a quiet strength about him that had nothing to do with his physical capabilities, though those were evident in the way he handled his horse and weapons. It was something deeper, a moral fortitude that had compelled him to stand against 5 armed outlaws for a woman he'd never met. Tell me about these friends we're going to see, Grace said as they navigated a narrow pass between towering rocks. Daniel and Sarah Miller, Sam replied. Good people. Daniel was a doctor back east before he came west. Sarah's a midwife. Grace felt a surge of relief at this news. A doctor and a midwife, that's fortunate, Sam glanced at her. Thought that might ease your mind. Their settlement's small but growing, decent folks mostly. They'll welcome you. And you, will you stay? Sam was quiet for a moment. For a while maybe, haven't decided yet. Because of Driscoll? Partly, Sam admitted. Man like that doesn't forget, and now he's got more reason than ever to come looking for me. Grace felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. I've brought nothing but trouble into your life. Sam's response was immediate and firm. You didn't bring anything, Grace. Trouble found you and you survived it. There's courage in that. They rode in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. The night was clear, stars scattered across the vast expanse of sky like diamonds on velvet. Despite the danger they were fleeing, Grace found herself marveling at the wild beauty surrounding them. "It's beautiful out here," she murmured. "So vast, makes a person feel small." Sam nodded. "That's why I stayed after everything. It puts things in perspective." "After everything?" Grace prompted gently. Sam was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was low. "I was married once. Her name was Emily. We had a little place not far from where my cabin is now." He paused. "She died in childbirth, the baby too, a boy." Grace's heart constricted. "Sam, I'm so sorry." "It was a long time ago, 8 years this winter." His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, but Grace sensed the depth of pain beneath his words. "I wasn't there when it happened, was off hunting by the time I got back." He shook his head. "Nothing I could do." "That's why you asked about the baby," Grace realized. "And why you mentioned the midwife." Sam nodded once, his jaw tight. No woman should face that alone. Grace understood then his determination to help her wasn't just about defying Driscoll or doing what was right. It was about redemption for a past he couldn't change. She wanted to offer comfort, but sensed Sam had already said more than he was accustomed to sharing. Instead, she simply said, "Thank you, Sam, for everything." He acknowledged her words with a slight nod, then guided them toward a small stream. "We'll water the horses here. Should reach Miller's Creek by dawn if we keep a steady pace." They dismounted near the stream, allowing the horses to drink while they stretched their legs. Grace winced as she walked, her lower back aching from the hours in the saddle. "You all right?" Sam asked, noticing her discomfort. "Just stiff," she assured him. "The baby makes riding more challenging than I remembered." Sam looked concerned. "We could rest longer if you need to." Grace shook her head. "No, I want to reach your friends as soon as possible. I'll be fine." As they prepared to mount up again, a twig snapped in the darkness behind them. Sam whirled, drawing his revolver in one fluid motion. Grace froze, her heart pounding. "Well, well," came a familiar voice from the shadows. "Fancy meeting you folks here." One of Driscoll's men stepped into the moonlight, his gun already drawn. 2 more figures emerged from the darkness, flanking him. "Where's Driscoll?" Sam asked, his voice steady despite the danger. The outlaw grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "He'll be along." "Send us ahead to track you down." His eyes shifted to Grace. "Ain't polite to steal a man's property, Jackson." "She's not property," Sam replied coldly. "And you're outnumbered." The outlaw laughed. "I count 2 of you want a woman heavy with child and 3 of us. Seems the odds favor us." "Count again," came a new voice from behind the outlaws. A tall man on horseback emerged from the trees, rifle aimed at the outlaws. Beside him rode a woman, her own rifle steady in her hands. The lead outlaw cursed, caught between 2 sets of armed adversaries. "Evening, Daniel," Sam called, not taking his eyes off the outlaws. "Didn't expect to meet you on the trail." "Spotted your dust yesterday morning," Daniel Miller replied. "Figured you might need a hand when we saw these 3 tracking you." The outlaws exchanged nervous glances, realizing their advantage had vanished. "This ain't over," the leader growled, but he slowly lowered his weapon. "Actually, it is," Daniel replied. "You boys are going to drop those guns and ride back to wherever you came from. Tell Driscoll that Miller's Creek isn't a place he wants to visit." For a tense moment, it seemed the outlaws might resist. Then, reluctantly, they placed their weapons on the ground. "This ain't finished," the leader spat as they backed toward their horses. "Driscoll won't forget this." "Neither will we," Sam replied evenly. They watched as the outlaws mounted up and disappeared into the darkness, riding hard back the way they had come. Only when they were gone did Sam holster his weapon and turn to the Millers. "Your timing couldn't have been better." Daniel Miller dismounted, a tall man with kind eyes and a beard streaked with gray. His wife, Sarah, joined him, her weathered face breaking into a warm smile. "Been too long, Sam," Daniel said, clasping Sam's hand firmly. "Though I wish the circumstances were better." Same, Sam agreed. He turned to Grace. Grace Lawson, meet Daniel and Sarah Miller, best friends a man could ask for. Sarah immediately moved to Grace's side, her experienced eyes taking in Grace's condition. You poor dear, you must be exhausted. She shot Sam a reproachful look. Riding in her condition, Sam. What were you thinking? That Driscoll and his men would do worse than make her uncomfortable, Sam replied grimly. Daniel nodded. He's right, Sarah. From the looks of those men, they meant serious harm. He turned to Grace. Mrs. Lawson, I'm a doctor. If you'll permit me, I'd like to examine you when we reach town to ensure all is well with you and your baby. Grace felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. Thank you, I would appreciate that very much. Our settlement is only a few hours' ride from here, Sarah said. We can have you in a proper bed by morning. They set out together, the Millers flanking Grace protectively while Sam took the lead. As they rode, Sarah asked gentle questions about Grace's pregnancy, offering reassurance and advice. Daniel and Sam rode ahead, speaking in low voices about Driscoll and the threat he posed. By the time the first light of dawn broke over the eastern horizon, the small settlement of Miller's Creek came into view. It was larger than Grace had expected, a cluster of neat buildings surrounding a central square, with outlying farms and homesteads dotting the surrounding valley. It's beautiful, Grace said as they approached. We've worked hard to make it so, Sarah replied with obvious pride. Started with just 5 families 8 years ago. Now we've got nearly 30, plus a school, a church, and Daniel's clinic. They rode down the main street, drawing curious glances from early risers beginning their day. Sarah led them to a tidy 2-story house near the center of town. This is our home, she explained as Daniel helped Grace dismount. We've plenty of room for both of you to stay as long as needed. Inside, the house was warm and welcoming, filled with simple but beautiful furnishings and the scent of fresh bread. Sarah immediately set about making breakfast while Daniel showed Grace to a comfortable bedroom on the first floor. Rest now, he advised. After you've eaten, I'll examine you to make sure everything's as it should be. Too exhausted to argue, Grace sank onto the bed, marveling at its softness after days of hard ground and horseback. She heard Sam and Daniel talking in the hallway. You've got a price on your head now, Sam, Daniel was saying. Driscoll's put out word $500 to whoever brings you in, dead or alive. Figured as much, Sam replied. I won't bring trouble to your door, Daniel, just needed to get Grace somewhere safe. And where will you go? Daniel asked. Back to your cabin. No. Too easy to find me there. I'll head north maybe, or further west. Alone, with Driscoll and every bounty hunter in 3 territories looking for you, wouldn't be the first time I've had to disappear for a while. Their voices faded as they moved away from the door. Grace felt a pang at the thought of Sam leaving. Despite the brevity of their acquaintance, he had become her lifeline in a world suddenly turned hostile and unfamiliar. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, Sarah was gently shaking her awake. Grace. I've brought you some breakfast. Daniel's ready to examine you whenever you feel up to it. Grace sat up slowly, accepting the tray Sarah offered. Fresh bread, eggs, and bacon, simple food that seemed like a feast after days of trail rations. As she ate, Sarah brought a basin of warm water and clean towels. I thought you might like to freshen up, she said kindly. I've laid out a clean dress for you as well. It might be a bit large, but it should do until we can get you something better. You're too kind, Grace said, overwhelmed by the woman's generosity. I don't know how I'll ever repay you, Sarah waved away her concerns. There's no debt between friends, dear, and any friend of Sam's is a friend of ours. After eating and washing, Grace felt renewed. The dress Sarah had provided was indeed too large, but with a few strategic pins, it fit well enough to preserve her dignity. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Daniel waiting in a small room he had equipped as a medical office. His examination was thorough but gentle, his manner professional and reassuring. The baby seems perfectly healthy, he concluded. Strong heartbeat, good position. And despite your ordeal, you appear to be in excellent health as well, Mrs. Lawson. Grace, please, she insisted, and thank you. That's a relief to hear, Daniel smiled. Rest and good nutrition are what you need most now. Sarah will make sure you get plenty of both. And Sam, is he still here? A shadow crossed Daniel's face. He's out with some of our men, securing the perimeter of the settlement. He's concerned Driscoll might try something rash. Because of me, Grace said, guilt weighing heavily on her. No, Daniel replied firmly. Because of who Driscoll is, a bully and a killer who can't stand being defied. Sam knew exactly what he was doing when he stood against him. When Grace returned to the main room of the house, she found Sarah working at the stove. Where is Sam's room? Grace asked. I'd like to speak with him when he returns. Sarah smiled knowingly. Upstairs, first door on the right, though I doubt he's used it much yet. That man never rests when he feels responsible for others' safety. She studied Grace for a moment. He's a good man, you know, the best I've known, aside from my Daniel. I'm beginning to see that, Grace admitted, though I still don't understand why he risks so much for a stranger. It's who he is, Sarah said simply. Always has been. Even after losing Emily and the baby, when most men would have turned bitter or lost themselves in drink, Sam just turned outward, started helping others even more. She wiped her hands on her apron. I think it was his way of giving meaning to their deaths, as if every life he saved somehow balanced the ones he couldn't. Grace absorbed this, understanding Sam a little better. He told me about his wife and son. I'm sorry for his loss. Sarah nodded sadly. It nearly destroyed him. But Sam's not a man who breaks easily. She changed the subject. Now, why don't you rest in the parlor? I'll call you when lunch is ready. Grace spent the day resting and getting to know Sarah better. The older woman was a wealth of knowledge about childbirth and infant care, and Grace found herself taking mental notes of her advice. By late afternoon, Grace was feeling restless and asked permission to walk in the garden behind the house. Of course, Sarah said. Just stay close and take this. She handed Grace a small derringer. Just in case. The garden was beautiful, neat rows of vegetables interspersed with colorful flowers. Grace walked slowly, enjoying the fresh air and sunshine. She was examining a particularly vibrant rose bush when she heard the garden gate open behind her. Sam stood there, looking exhausted but relieved to see her. Daniel said I'd find you here. How are you feeling? Better, Grace replied. Dr. Miller says the baby and I are both healthy. How about you? You look tired, Sam shrugged. Been securing the town. Driscoll hasn't shown his face yet, but it's only a matter of time. Grace gestured to the bench beside the rose bush. Will you sit with me, please? Sam hesitated, then joined her on the bench. They sat in silence for a moment, watching bees buzz around the flowers. Daniel tells me you're planning to leave, Grace finally said. Sam nodded. It's for the best. As long as I'm here, everyone in town is at risk, including me, especially you. Sam's eyes met hers. Driscoll wants you for his own twisted reasons, and now he wants me dead for defying him. Grace took a deep breath. What if I asked you to stay? Sam looked surprised. Why would you do that? Because I feel safe when you're near, Grace admitted. Because you've already risked everything for me once, and I trust you to do it again if necessary, because... She faltered, then continued more softly, because in the short time I've known you, I've come to care about what happens to you. Sam was silent, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, Grace, you're still grieving your husband, and you're vulnerable. Don't mistake gratitude for something else. I loved Thomas, Grace said firmly. I always will, but he's gone and I'm still here. So is our child, and I need to think about our future. She placed her hand over his. I'm not asking for promises, Sam. I'm just asking you not to disappear without giving us a chance to see if there might be something worth staying for. Sam looked down at their hands. I'm not the settling type anymore, Grace, not since Emily. I'm not asking you to settle, Grace replied. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that running isn't the only way to protect the people you care about. Before Sam could respond, shouting erupted from the direction of the town. Sam was on his feet instantly, his hand going to his gun. Get inside, he ordered. Now. Grace hurried back to the house, Sam close behind her. Daniel met them at the door, his face grim. Driscoll, he said without preamble, rode into town with 15 men. They've taken positions around the square. Sam's expression hardened. What does he want? You, Daniel replied. And the woman? He's giving us 1 hour to hand you both over, or he says they'll burn the town to the ground. Sarah appeared behind her husband, her face pale but determined. We won't let that happen, Sam. The town's already mobilizing. Every man who can hold a gun is taking position. Sam shook his head. No, I won't have others dying for my choices. He turned to Grace. Stay here with Sarah. No matter what happens, don't leave this house. What are you going to do? Grace asked, fear clutching at her heart. End this, Sam replied. Once and for all. Before Grace could protest, Sam and Daniel left, closing the door firmly behind them. Sarah immediately moved to the window, peering through the curtains. The men are gathering, she reported. At least 20 of ours against Driscoll's 15. Grace joined her at the window. In the town square, she could see the standoff forming, Driscoll and his men on one side, the townsmen on the other. In the center stood Sam and Daniel, facing Driscoll directly. I can't hear what they're saying, Grace said, frustration evident in her voice. I can guess, Sarah replied grimly. Driscoll making demands, Sam refusing, Daniel trying to negotiate. As they watched, Sam stepped forward, separating himself from the town's defenders. He said something to Driscoll that made the outlaw laugh mockingly. What is he doing? Grace whispered. Challenging him, Sarah realized. One-on-one, man-to-man. Fear gripped Grace's heart. He can't, Driscoll won't fight fair. Sarah's expression was grim. Sam knows that, but he also knows it's the only way to avoid a bloodbath. They watched in tense silence as Sam and Driscoll faced each other in the center of the square. Both men had their hands hovering near their holsters. The town grew deathly quiet. Grace couldn't bear to watch, but she couldn't look away either. Her hands clenched the windowsill so tightly her knuckles turned white. Come on, Sam, Sarah murmured. You can do this. The tension stretched to the breaking point. Then, in a blur of movement too fast for Grace to follow, both men drew. 2 shots rang out, so close together they sounded almost like one. Driscoll staggered backward, a look of surprise on his face. He touched his chest, his fingers coming away red with blood. He took one more step, then collapsed face first in the dirt. Sam remained standing, his gun still raised. For a moment, no one moved. Then one of Driscoll's men reached for his weapon. Before he could draw, the townsmen raised their rifles in unison. It's over, they heard Daniel call. Your leader's dead, you can ride out now or you can join him, your choice. For a tense moment it seemed the outlaws might fight, then one by one they lowered their hands. They retrieved Driscoll's body, slung it over his horse and mounted up. As they rode out of town, one of them called back, "This ain't finished, Jackson." Sam's reply carried clearly to where Grace and Sarah watched. "Yes, it is, don't come back." Only when the last outlaw had disappeared from sight did Grace release the breath she'd been holding. "He did it," she whispered. "He's safe." Sarah squeezed her shoulder. For now, but Driscoll had friends, and enemies have long memories in these parts. Grace turned to her, sudden determination filling her. "Then we'll be ready for them, all of us together." When Sam returned to the house an hour later, he found Grace waiting for him in the parlor. The others had tactfully given them privacy. "Are you hurt?" Grace asked, scanning him for injuries. Sam shook his head. "No, got lucky." "That wasn't luck," Grace said firmly. "That was skill and courage." Sam sank into a chair, the events of the day finally catching up with him. "It was necessity. Couldn't let the town suffer for my choices." Grace moved to kneel beside his chair, taking his hand in hers. "Our choices, Sam. We're in this together now." Sam looked down at her, conflict evident in his eyes. "Grace." "I know what you're going to say," she interrupted, "that it's too soon, that I don't know what I want. That you're not looking to replace what you lost." She squeezed his hand. "I'm not asking for any promises today, I'm just asking you to stay, to give us time to figure out what comes next." Sam was silent for a long moment. "And if what comes next is more trouble?" More men looking to make a name for themselves by taking down the man who killed Driscoll? Then we'll face it together, Grace replied without hesitation. I'm stronger than I look, Sam, and I'm tired of running. A ghost of a smile touched Sam's lips. I've noticed that about you. So you'll stay? Sam looked into her eyes, and something shifted in his expression, a softening of the hard lines, a glimmer of hope where there had been only resignation. Yes, he said finally. For now, I'll stay. Over the next few weeks, Grace settled into life in Miller's Creek. The townspeople welcomed her warmly, offering support and friendship. Sarah introduced her to the other women in town, and soon Grace had a circle of friends who helped prepare for the baby's arrival. Sam remained somewhat apart from town life, preferring to spend his time patrolling the perimeter or helping Daniel with various projects. But each evening, he would join Grace for dinner, and afterward, they would sit on the Miller's porch and talk. Gradually, Grace learned more about Sam's past, his childhood in Missouri, his time with the cavalry, the years with Emily, and the dark period after her death. In turn, she shared stories of her own life, her family's farm in Pennsylvania, meeting Thomas at church when she was 16, their early struggle to make ends meet, and finally, their hopes for a new beginning in Denver. As Grace's time grew closer, Sam's protective instincts intensified. He rarely left town, and when he did, it was only for a few hours at a time. The threat from Driscoll's associates seemed to have diminished, but Sam remained vigilant. One evening in early December, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Grace felt the first contraction. She gasped, her hand going to her belly. Sam was immediately alert. "What is it, the baby?" Grace nodded, trying to stay calm. "I think so, but it's just beginning. First babies often take their time." Sam was on his feet in an instant. "I'll get Daniel and Sarah." The next 12 hours were a blur of pain and determination for Grace. Sarah stayed by her side throughout, offering encouragement and practical help. Daniel checked on her regularly, his calm demeanor reassuring. And outside the bedroom door, Sam paced relentlessly, unable to sit still, unwilling to leave. When Grace's cries intensified, he would stop, his face a mask of anguish, his hands clenched into helpless fists. "She'll be all right," Daniel assured him during one such moment. "Grace is strong and the baby is positioned well." "Emily was strong too," Sam replied, his voice raw with old grief. Daniel placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "This isn't the same, Sam. I'm here, Sarah's here. We have everything we need if complications arise." Sam nodded, but his pacing resumed the moment Daniel returned to Grace's side. As dawn broke over the settlement, a new cry joined Grace's, the lusty wail of a healthy newborn. Sam froze mid-step, his heart pounding as he waited for news. The bedroom door opened and Sarah emerged, her face tired but radiant. "It's a boy," she announced. "Strong and perfect. Grace is asking for you." Sam hesitated. "Are you sure? She must be exhausted." "She is," Sarah agreed, "but she wants you there. Both of you need this, Sam." Taking a deep breath, Sam entered the bedroom. Grace lay propped against pillows, her face pale but glowing with new motherhood. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was a tiny bundle. "Come meet Thomas Samuel Lawson," Grace said softly as Sam approached the bed. "Named for the two bravest men I've known." Sam's throat tightened with emotion as he looked down at the baby. A shock of dark hair, tiny fists, perfectly formed features still red and wrinkled from birth. "He's beautiful," Sam whispered. "Just like his mother." Grace shifted the baby in her arms. "Would you like to hold him?" Sam took a step back, sudden fear in his eyes. I've never." "It's all right," Grace assured him. "Just support his head, like this." Before he could protest further, she placed the baby in his arms. Sam stood frozen, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid this moment might shatter like glass. The baby yawned, his tiny mouth forming a perfect O, then settled against Sam's chest with complete trust. Something broke open inside Sam, a dam of grief and loneliness that had held for 8 long years. "Hello, little one," he managed, his voice rough with emotion. "Welcome to the world. Grace watched them together, tears of joy streaming down her face. In that moment, she knew with certainty that they would be all right, all three of them. The weeks following young Thomas's birth were a time of adjustment and joy. Grace recovered quickly, her strength returning day by day. The baby thrived under the loving attention of not only his mother, but also Sarah and the other women of the town who took turns helping Grace. And Sam. Sam underwent the most profound transformation of all. The man who had lived alone for years, who had kept the world at arm's length, now found himself utterly captivated by a 7-pound miracle with his mother's eyes. He built a cradle with his own hands, working late into the night to finish it before Grace and the baby left the miller's home for the small house the town had prepared for them. When he presented it to Grace, the pride in his eyes matched the gratitude in hers. "It's beautiful, Sam," she said, running her hand over the smooth wood. "You have a gift." Sam shrugged, embarrassed by the praise. "Just wanted him to have something solid, something that will last." Grace heard the deeper meaning in his words. "Like you," she said softly. "Someone solid. Someone who will last." Sam met her eyes, and for once he didn't look away or change the subject. "If you'll have me," he said simply. "Both of you." Grace's heart swelled. "Is that a proposal, Samuel Jackson?" "Not a very good one," Sam admitted with a rueful smile. "But yes, I love you, Grace. And that boy of yours, he's stolen whatever was left of my heart." He took her hand in his. "I know it hasn't been long. I know you're still healing from losing Thomas. If you need more time," Grace silenced him by placing her fingers gently against his lips. "Some things don't need time, Sam. Some things you just know." She smiled up at him. "Yes, my answer is yes." They were married 2 weeks later in the town's small church. Baby Thomas slept peacefully in Sarah's arms throughout the ceremony. The entire settlement turned out for the occasion, filling the church to capacity. As winter gave way to spring, Sam built an addition to their small house. By summer, he had started a horse breeding operation on the outskirts of town, his reputation for quality stock spreading throughout the territory. Grace, meanwhile, became an integral part of the community. Her natural warmth and practicality made her well suited to frontier life. When Sarah mentioned needing help with her midwifery duties, Grace began apprenticing with her, finding fulfillment in helping other women through the journey of childbirth. Young Thomas grew into a sturdy toddler with his mother's smile and his adoptive father's determined spirit. Sam taught him to ride almost before he could walk, much to Grace's mingled alarm and amusement. Occasionally, word would reach them of former associates of Driscoll's causing trouble in other settlements, but none ever ventured near Miller's Creek again. The town's reputation for standing together against threats became well known throughout the territory. On the 2nd anniversary of their meeting that fateful day, when a desperate pregnant woman had stumbled onto a lone cabin in the wilderness, Sam took Grace, riding to a beautiful overlook near town. Little Thomas stayed with the Millers, excited for a day of being spoiled by his honorary grandparents. As they stood together looking out over the valley where they had made their home, Sam wrapped his arms around Grace from behind, his hands resting gently on the new swell of her belly. "Happy?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. Grace leaned back against him, covering his hands with her own. "More than I ever thought possible again," she replied honestly. "You?" Sam was quiet for a moment, contemplating the question. "For a long time, I thought happiness was something that happened to other people, not to me, not after Emily." He turned Grace to face him. "You taught me differently, you and Thomas." Grace reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the lines that had softened over the past 2 years. "We taught each other, I think, about second chances, about finding hope when it seems impossible." Sam placed his hand over hers. "When you rode onto my property that day, I was just existing, going through the motions of living without really being alive." "And now?" Grace prompted. Sam smiled, the full, unguarded smile that still made her heart skip. "Now I'm living every day, for you, for Thomas, for this little one on the way." He placed his hand on her belly, and for myself, because you were right that day in the garden. Running isn't the only way to protect the people you love. Sometimes standing your ground is the braver choice, Grace agreed. The day I drew my gun on Driscoll, I wasn't just buying you tomorrow, Sam said thoughtfully. I was buying myself one too, I just didn't realize it at the time. Grace stood on tiptoe to kiss him. Then I'm glad we've made the most of every day since. As they rode back to town, side by side in the golden afternoon light, Grace reflected on the strange paths that had led them both to this moment. The tragedy that had claimed her first husband. The heartbreak that had shaped Sam into the man she'd come to love. The desperate flight that had brought them together. Miller's Creek appeared in the distance their home now, in a way neither of them could have imagined 2 years ago. Soon they would collect Thomas, whose excitement at being a big brother grew daily. They would continue building their life together, day by day, embracing whatever challenges came their way. And as they rode through the town gates, greeted warmly by neighbors and friends, Grace said a silent prayer of gratitude for second chances, for brave men who stand their ground, and for the unexpected gift of tomorrow.